L.A. Movie by Philip Prowse. Chapter 1. The Purple Palace. The woman with platinum blonde hair and green eyes put her little finger in her mouth. "Hey," she said, "for an old guy, you're not bad looking." She sipped some champagne from her glass. Then she smiled. She smiled, and suddenly her whole face changed. Before, she had looked like a naughty child. Now she was a beautiful woman. She had high cheekbones below her beautiful green eyes. She had a long, straight nose and a wide mouth. Her shiny blonde hair was cut short. Her eyes were shining as she looked straight at me. "Yeah," she went on, "you really don't look too bad. Do you know something, mister? I could fall for a guy like you." What could I say? I'm in my early 30s. Well, that's what I tell people. The truth is that I'm nearer 40, and the woman I was looking at couldn't have been a day more than 23. I meet lots of women in my line of work, but I rarely meet anyone as beautiful as this one. And on the few occasions when I have met a real stunner, she certainly hasn't wanted to have anything to do with me. Still, the woman had a point. I'm not bad looking. Dark hair, brown eyes, good teeth, nice clothes. And I've kept myself in shape. I go to the gym 3 times a week. It's true that my face shows the marks of my time as an amateur boxer. There are some small scars round my eyes, and my nose isn't quite straight anymore. Somebody broke it in a fight. "The only problem," the woman continued, "is your job. No one ever got rich by doing your job. And I like expensive things." She smiled again. She had another point. I was sure that she spent a lot of money, and I certainly wasn't rich. I'm a private investigator, that is, a private detective, in Los Angeles, California. My clients are often people who live on the edges of L.A. society. Protection, security, blackmail, corruption, missing persons, small crimes. These are the things I deal with every day. Sometimes I even have a murder case. The only jobs I don't do are divorce cases and marriage problems. My life isn't easy, but there's usually enough money each month to pay the rent for my apartment and the rent for my office. But there isn't any place in my life for a woman who looks like $1 million and dresses as if she had $1 million. And the woman I was looking at now was obviously one of those. "Still, what the hell?" the blonde said. She put down her glass of champagne and took a step towards me. "Come on, Charlie. We're alone tonight. Kiss me." "Charlie? My name's not Charlie. It's Lenny. Lenny Samuel. Some people call me Len." Still, I wasn't gonna argue. I stood up and took a step towards the blonde. "Hey, fella, sit down," a man's voice shouted. The blonde smiled. I opened my arms. "Hey, fella, I told you to sit down," the man shouted again. I stared into the blonde's beautiful green eyes. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. "Sit down now," the voice said. I turned around. The man standing behind me was taller than me and heavier. I'm 1.90 meters tall, and I weigh just over 90 kilos. All muscle. But this guy was bigger than me in every way, and he was angry. "Sit down, fella," he shouted. "I can't see the screen if you stand there." I sat down, and I looked up at the movie screen again. Now the blonde actress was kissing a man. It was a close-up shot. The woman was 30 meters away from me, and her face was 5 meters high. Her name was Gail Lane. She was the hottest actress in Hollywood, and this was the closest I'd ever got to her. "I'm sorry, fella," I said to the man behind me. "I guess I got carried away." I go to the movies a lot, especially when business is bad. And just then, business was very bad indeed. My last case had ended a few weeks before. Someone had stolen a racehorse from a beautiful woman. I'd found the horse, but I hadn't earned any money. Since then, I tidied my office, cleaned my car, gone to the gym a lot, and waited for the phone to ring. It hadn't rung. I didn't have any new clients, so most days I went to the movies. The movie ended and the lights came on. I got up and went to the men's washroom. There was a floor-to-ceiling mirror there, and I stood in front of it and looked at myself. It was true. I wasn't bad looking. I was wearing a black leather jacket, a bright checked shirt, and a pair of new black trousers. My brown Timberland boots completed the picture. I took out my dark glasses and put them on. "Cool," I said to the mirror, and I walked out of the movie theater. It was just before midnight. I decided that I didn't need the dark glasses. I walked round the corner to the parking lot, and I got into my old gray Chrysler. Then I drove slowly past the bars and clubs, trying to decide what to do. It was too early to go to bed, but it was too late to start calling friends to see if they wanted to go out. I was bored. I wanted something to happen. I was just passing the Purple Palace, one of LA's most expensive nightclubs, when something did happen. A shiny, white open-top car suddenly pulled out from the sidewalk. I hit the brakes, and the Chrysler stopped. But the white car didn't stop. It hit the side of the Chrysler with a loud crash. I was okay. I got out of the car. The Chrysler was okay, too. They don't make cars like that anymore. But the white car wasn't okay, and neither was its driver. The front of the car was badly smashed, and oil was running out from under the engine. The driver was still sitting at the wheel, and there was some blood on his face. The driver of the white car was wearing a smart suit, and he had short, well-cut hair. He looked about 25, but his hair was steel gray. After a few moments, he opened the car door. He walked towards me with an angry face. "I'm going to make you pay for this," he said. He tried to grab my arm. His breath smelt of whiskey. Then he tried to hit me. He tried, but he didn't succeed. I used to be a boxer, and this man was drunk. I leant back, and the blow missed. I was about to knock the man to the ground when he suddenly closed his eyes and fell over. I hadn't touched him. I felt a hand on my shoulder. "That guy's a fool," a voice said. I turned around. It was a woman with platinum blonde hair and beautiful green eyes. Chapter 2. What do you want me to do? "That guy's a fool," Gail Lane repeated. "I'm sorry, mister." I opened my mouth to say something, but no words came out. I was standing in the middle of a busy street in downtown L.A. with the hottest actress in Hollywood. "Say something," Gail said. "Hey, well, what do you want me to do?" I managed to say. "Well, let's start by getting my car off the road," Gail said. "Your car?" I asked. "Yeah," she replied. "It's my car. He shouldn't have been driving it. He's had far too much to drink. The parking attendant brought the car around to the front of the club, and Mike took the keys. I argued with him, but he wouldn't let me drive." "Mike?" I asked. "Do you repeat everything someone says?" Gail asked sharply. "Mike Devine is his name. Have you ever heard of him?" I had. Mike Devine was the son of Joel Devine, who is a rich and successful movie producer. Mike had never done a day's work in his life, but he was never short of money. His father made sure of that. As a result, Mike Devine had got into lots of trouble. There were always stories about him in the newspapers. Stories about gambling debts, accidents, women, things like that. Now, Mike Devine lay in the street next to my Chrysler. Gail and I pushed the damaged white car to the sidewalk. A crowd of people was standing there staring at us. Then someone recognized Gail. Suddenly, people started to point at us and talk. Gail looked at me. She smiled, and her face changed, just like it had in the movie. She touched my arm. "There is something else you can do for me," she said in a quiet, warm voice. "I can't stay here. People have seen me. I've got to get home. Will you help me, please?" "Sure," I said. "Let's go." I was delighted. I was excited. Perhaps Gail would invite me into her apartment. There would be soft lights and soft music. Anything might happen. She smiled at me again. "You're a nice guy," she said. We walked over to the Chrysler. Mike Devine's eyes were open now. There was blood on his smart suit. When he saw Gail, he stood up and held on to the side of my Chrysler. "Get into this guy's car before the police come, Mike," Gail said to the young man. She pulled Mike Devine by his jacket, opened the back door of the Chrysler, and pushed him in. "Oh," I muttered, "you'd like me to take him home, too?" "He lives at 9002 Hollywood Boulevard," Gail said sweetly. "Thank you for your help." "It's a pleasure," I replied. "Please, get in." I opened the front passenger door. Gail looked puzzled for a moment. Then she laughed. "No, thanks," she said. "I'm taking a cab. Thank you again for your help." Her lips touched my cheek briefly, and then she was gone. She ran to the sidewalk where the doorman of the Purple Palace called a cab for her. I watched her go. Then I got into the Chrysler. There was a strange noise coming from the back seat. I turned round. Mike Devine was being sick. I opened the window and drove away. A few minutes later, Mike Devine was unconscious. 9002 Hollywood Boulevard was a tall, new building with windows of black glass. I stopped outside it and switched off the Chrysler's engine. A doorman came out of the building and walked up to the car. He was a short, heavy man with a small mustache. "Hey, you can't park here, mister," the doorman said. I pointed at the unconscious figure lying on the back seat. "Does he live here?" I asked. The doorman looked at Mike. Then he opened the back door of the car and stepped away as the smell reached him. "Yeah, he lives here," the doorman replied. "Apartment 501. "Help me to take him up to his apartment," I said. Together, the doorman and I carried Mike Devine into the hallway and across to the elevator. The doorman came up with us in the elevator and waited while I found some keys in Mike Devine's trouser pocket. I unlocked the apartment door. "Okay," the doorman said. "Are you a friend of Mr. Devine?" "Well, no," I replied. "But I'm a friend of a friend." "Why?" "We're very careful about who comes in and out of this building. But if you're a friend of Mr. Devine's friend, then I guess you can go in," the doorman replied. "But you'll have to give me your name." I gave him one of my business cards. "Huh, a private eye," the doorman muttered. "A private detective," I replied. "But you can keep an eye on my car." "Okay," the doorman replied and got back into the elevator. I opened the apartment door and pulled Mike Devine into a big living room. I knew at once that something was wrong. All the lights were on. Clothes and books were lying all over the floor. Paintings hung sideways on the walls. "Where's the bathroom?" I asked Mike. He muttered something and pointed to a door. I took him into the bathroom and turned on the shower. Full power, ice cold. Then I pushed him into the shower with his clothes on. He made a noise when the ice-cold water hit his face, but 5 minutes later, Mike could stand up on his own with his eyes open. I threw him a towel. "Get dried, then put some clean clothes on," I said. I'll wait for you in the living room." I closed the bathroom door and started to look around the apartment more carefully. The living room was a real mess. The windows were open, and the curtains were moving in the gentle wind. There was a corridor on my left. I guessed there were bedrooms behind the doors in the corridor. I opened the first door quietly. I saw a large bedroom. It was decorated in white. White walls, white carpet, a huge white bed. I stepped into the room and walked towards the bed. I don't know what I was looking for. Then I heard a noise behind me. Before I could turn round, something hit me on the back of the head. I guess I must have fallen heavily to the floor, but I was unconscious by then. Chapter 3. Mike Devine. I could feel hands touching my body. The hands turned me onto my side. Someone started to empty the pockets of my leather jacket. They took out my wallet, my business cards, my gun. I opened my eyes a little. A face was looking at me. It had short blonde hair and green eyes, and it was smiling at me. I smiled back. But the blonde woman's face didn't change. I closed my eyes and opened them again. She was still smiling at me. I moved my head a little. It hurt. "Sit up," a voice said. It wasn't Gale Lane's voice. It was a man who spoke. I opened my eyes wide and saw that I had been looking at a photograph of Gale. The photograph was on a low white bedside table. Mike Devine was sitting on the edge of the bed. He was wearing a white bathrobe with Palm Beach Resort written on it. He was holding my gun, and he was pointing it at my head. "Now," Mike Devine said in a quiet, hard voice, "who are you, and what are you doing on my bedroom floor?" I touched the back of my head. It still hurt. I looked at my watch. 2:00. I must have been unconscious for over an hour. Mike Devine had obviously woken up after the cold shower I'd given him. "You can see who I am," I replied. "You've got my business cards. Look in my wallet and you'll find my detective's license. Then please give me my things back." Mike Devine laughed. The gun was still pointing at my head. "I'm not that stupid," he said, and he threw the wallet over to me. "You open the wallet and show me your license." I picked up the wallet and showed him my detective's license. "Okay," Mike Devine went on. "Now tell me what you're doing here. My apartment has been wrecked, and you're lying on my bedroom floor." I told Mike what had happened and how I'd helped him to get home. He looked at me and shook his head. "No," he said after a moment. "I don't remember a thing, and I don't believe you." He walked over to a phone by the bed and picked it up. "Get me security," he said. There was a pause. After a few moments, he spoke again. "Security? Hi, this is Mike Devine in 501. I've got an intruder here. Can you come up?" "No, I'm not in danger. I've got his gun." Mike hung up and sat down on the bed. "You're making a mistake," I said. "We'll soon find out," he replied. 2 minutes later, someone rang the bell of the apartment door, and Mike Devine went to open it. A moment later, he came back into the bedroom with another man. It was the doorman with the mustache, the man who had helped me carry Devine in from the car. "Where's the intruder?" the doorman asked. Mike Devine pointed at me. The doorman gave a short, loud laugh. "He's a private eye," the doorman said. "He brought you home, and he and I carried you up here." Mike Devine looked at me in surprise. He threw my gun back to me. "I'm sorry, fella," he said. "I've got a couple of questions," I said to the doorman. Did you let anyone in here earlier this evening? And did anyone leave after I got here?"
"The answer to both questions is no," the doorman replied. "I don't let people into apartments when the owner's out, and no one left. If anyone had gone out through the hallway, I would have seen them."
Mike Devine thanked the doorman, then turned to me.
"There's one thing, Mr. Samuel. I don't seem to have any money on me. Could you lend me $50?
I smiled. Rich people. They're the ones who've never got any money. I opened my wallet and gave Mike $50. He walked over to the doorman and gave him the money.
"There's no need to say anything about this to anyone," Mike said.
The doorman thanked him and left the apartment. I sat on the bed and thought about what had happened. Who had hit me on the head? Had Mike himself done it? If he hadn't hit me, there must have been someone else in the apartment. Certainly someone had wrecked the living room. Perhaps that person had hit me on the head when I came into the bedroom. But why? I asked myself the question, but my head hurt and I felt tired. I couldn't think of an answer.
"Look," Mike said, "I'm sorry. It's late. Can I offer you a bed for the night? I don't know who's been here. Whoever hit you on the head must have got out while I was in the bathroom. Perhaps they thought they were hitting me."
"But the doorman said that no one had left the building," I replied. "So perhaps they're still here somewhere. Or perhaps they're hiding in another apartment. But they must have a key to your apartment. The first thing to do is to make sure they're not still here." Together, we searched every room in Mike Devine's apartment. We found no one. Suddenly, I had an idea. "I won't take your offer of a bed for the night," I said. "My car's outside. The police will take it away if I leave it in the street any longer."
"Put the car in the garage," Mike said. "There's a garage underneath the apartment building, and the elevator goes straight down to it."
My idea had been a good one. Mike had told me something that I had already guessed. So, someone could have left the apartment, then taken the elevator down to the garage and driven away without the doorman seeing them, I said. At that moment, the phone rang. Mike Devine answered it.
"Yes," he said. "Yes, I see."
Then he hung up. He looked terrible. "Who was it?" I asked.
"Someone I owe some money to," he replied. "He said that he wrecked the apartment. He said it was a warning. He said he was sorry he had hit you. He thought you were me. And he said that next time he wouldn't wreck my apartment. He would wreck me."
So the person who had hit me on the head was trying to frighten Mike Devine. And he had succeeded. Mike was looking very frightened indeed.
"Mr. Samuel," Mike said, "I think I need some protection. I will pay you to stay here for the rest of the night. Will $200 be all right?"
"Plus the 50 you borrowed," I replied with a smile. I left the apartment and went down to the hallway. I told the doorman I was staying for the rest of the night. Then I went out into the street. Quickly, I drove the Chrysler into the underground garage. 10 minutes later, I had turned off the lights in Mike Devine's living room, and I was sitting in a comfortable chair with my gun beside me. Mike had gone to sleep in his huge white bed. The hours passed. Nothing happened. There were no intruders. I didn't get any sleep. The phone rang at 6 o'clock. I answered it. "Mr. Devine's apartment," I said.
"Who's that?"
a woman's voice asked. I knew that voice. It was Gail Lane. At that point, Mike Devine picked up a phone in his bedroom and began to speak. I hung up immediately, so I never knew what she said to him. Chapter 4. Crazy Ellen's. I knocked on Mike Devine's bedroom door. "It's Lenny Samuel," I called through the door. "I'm leaving now, Mr. Devine. There's one of my business cards on the table in the living room. You can send me the $250 later." Mike muttered something inside the bedroom. I didn't understand what he said. I left the apartment, got the Chrysler from the garage, and drove home. After a couple of hours' sleep, a hot shower, and some clean clothes, I was a new man. I drove downtown to my office building, parked the car, and went into Crazy Ellen's. Crazy Ellen's is a bar and a cafe and a diner and a meeting place. It's next to the building where my office is on West Beaumont Drive. Don't ask me where the name of the bar came from. The owner of Crazy Ellen's isn't a mad woman called Ellen, or even a sane woman called Ellen. The owner is a man, an old Greek called Kostas. I've known him for more years than I want to remember. I go to his bar a lot. People know that if I'm not in my office, I'll probably be at Crazy Ellen's. "Hi, Len," Kostas shouted as I came in. It was shortly after 9 o'clock and the place was empty. "Hey, you look tired. Didn't you sleep?" "Hi, Kostas," I said, taking a seat at the bar. "I'm okay. Give me some black coffee, some orange juice, and a couple of fried eggs, please." I ate my breakfast and I chatted to Kostas about baseball. Then I went to my office, 2 rooms on the 4th floor of an old building. On the floor of the waiting room, there was a pile of mail. I stepped over it and went through to my private room. There's not a lot to see. A desk, a couple of chairs, a gray filing cabinet, a window with a broken blind. I blew the dust off my chair and sat down at the desk. The red light on the answer phone told me that some phone messages were waiting for me. I pressed the play messages button. There were 2 messages. The first message was from a man who didn't give his name. The message was short and simple. "If you know what's good for you, Samuel, you'll take a holiday," the voice said. "The next time, it won't be just a little knock on the head." Interesting. This was a warning. And it was connected with Mike Devine in some way. But who was warning me? I didn't recognize the voice, and the caller hadn't left a number for me to phone. But I knew the second caller as soon as he started to speak. It was a man called Rick. Rick Roma and I were old friends. "Hi, Len. How are things?" Rick said. "Listen, I may have a job for you. Can you meet me for lunch today? Give me a call." And he left a phone number for me to call. Rick's full name is Riccardo, and he is Italian-American. His family came from Sicily in the 1930s. Rick and I worked together in the LAPD, the Los Angeles Police Department. My family is Hispanic. My full name is Leonardo, though people always call me Len or Lenny. My family came to the U.S. from Puerto Rico, so Rick and I had something we could talk about. Rick and I left the LAPD at about the same time. Rick went to work as a security man at a big movie studio in Hollywood. I became a private eye. Rick had done very well over the years. He'd been very successful in his work, and he was now head of security at Magic Movie Productions. He always had new cars, and he lived in a luxury house in the hills with 2 swimming pools. Me? Well, I've got an old car, a small apartment, and a little wooden cabin in the hills. You can guess how well I've done. I called Rick, and we arranged to meet at Gate 4 of the Magic Movie Production Studios at 1 o'clock. I spent the rest of the morning at the gym in the basement of my office building. Then I had a quick shower and drove across town to the studios. Rick was standing outside Gate 4. Rick is tall and thin, with a high forehead and short black hair. He has deep brown eyes. When he looks at you, you think he's looking through you. I got out of my car, and Rick put his arm around my shoulder. Then he led me through the gate, showing his security pass to the guard. You have to show a pass? I laughed. Sure, Len. The security's real tight here, Rick replied. We had lunch in the studio commissary, the movie studio's name for a restaurant, with 15 nuns, 20 Japanese warriors, 50 English peasants, several princesses, and a giant. We're making a fantasy movie in Studio 12, Rick explained. These are the extras. They walk on and off the set, but they don't have speaking parts. The stars and the other actors have their own private dining rooms. They don't eat at the commissary. So what other movies are being made here at the moment? I asked. I have always been fascinated by movie making since I was a child. I was really interested. Rick laughed. We don't make very many movies here at the studios anymore. Most of the studio area is used for tourism. We get lots of tourist groups visiting Hollywood. They come in to see the old sets, the sets of movies we made in the past. But now, most of our movies are made on location, often in other countries. For example, many of the best people for special effects are in England, so we often work there. And we shoot scenes all over the world. Sometimes we do part of a movie here and then go on location for the rest of it. I was disappointed. I'd been hoping to see a movie being made. I told Rick this. He smiled. I'll see what I can do, he said. I'll try to arrange something after lunch. But before we eat, I want to ask you a question. Are you busy at the moment? Or would you like to do a job for us? Something a little unusual. I didn't need time to think. Yeah, I said. I'm pretty busy, but I guess I could do something for you. Rick laughed. You always were a bad liar. This is what it's about. He took a photograph out of his pocket and passed it over to me. Do you recognize her? Gail Lane was smiling at me from the photograph. Yes, I replied. I spoke to her this morning. Chapter 5. Death Behind the Door. I gave the photo back to Rick and I listened to him carefully. You obviously know who she is, he began. But what do you mean about speaking to her this morning? She's working here at the studios today. She was on the set at 7 o'clock. Don't worry about it, I replied. I meant that I dreamt about her. I was speaking to her in my dreams. Yeah, so were a few million other men, Rick said with a laugh. But this is serious, Len. Gail Lane is the hottest actress in Hollywood this year. The studio has invested a lot of money in her. She's a big star in the U.S. already, and she'll soon become a world star. That's why the things that have happened have worried the studio bosses so much. What has happened, Rick? I interrupted. Tell me. You're being very mysterious. Well, Len, I'll tell you. Rick spoke quietly now, although the nuns at the next table certainly weren't listening to us. This is very secret. Only one other person knows about it. You must promise not to tell anyone about what I'm going to tell you. If it's secret, why are you talking to me about it? I asked. Why aren't you telling your own studio security staff? Because no one else in Magic Movie Productions must find out about this, Rick replied. Those are the orders of Homer Frank, the studio's chief executive. Gail Lane is working on a movie here at the moment, Rick went on. It's an international thriller, and the budget is huge. We're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on this movie, so that makes Gail very valuable, and someone has been sending death threats. Rick, do you mean that Gail Lane has been getting letters from someone who's threatening to kill her? I asked. Not exactly, Rick replied with a shake of the head. Then he paused while the waitress came to take our orders. I ordered tuna with a green salad, and Rick ordered pasta.
The threats were sent by email directly to Homer Frank, Rick continued. Gail doesn't know about them. She hasn't been told. Mr. Frank is afraid that she'll get scared.
I can understand that, I said. I'd get scared if someone said they were going to kill me. What exactly did these messages say?
There were 3 messages, all sent during the last 3 days,
Rick answered in a low voice.
They said, death behind the door will be the death of Gail Lane. Stop the movie, or we'll stop her. All the messages were the same.
I was puzzled. Sorry, Rick, I said. I heard the words, but I didn't understand them. Rick sighed.
Okay, I'll try again. Gail Lane is making a movie for Magic Movie Productions called Death Behind the Door. The message says that unless we stop making the movie, Gail will be killed.
Our food arrived and we stopped talking for a few minutes. The tuna was great. It was juicy with a lime and sweet pepper sauce. I was thinking hard while I ate it. Rick ate his pasta hungrily. There obviously wasn't anything wrong with that either. Rick, you've got to tell Gail about these threats, I said as we finished eating. She might not want to risk being in this movie. You must give her the choice.
We can't afford to stop the movie, Len, Rick said quietly. It's half finished now. There are hundreds of millions of bucks invested in it. Mr. Frank won't stop the movie. But we are going to protect Miss Lane, and that's where I want your help.
I don't think I'd be a good bodyguard, Rick, I said quickly. Gail Lane is very attractive. I couldn't be near her and do the job properly. Rick laughed.
No, Len, he said. Gail already has 2 bodyguards, very good ones. I want you to join the movie crew, so that you're on the set all the time. I want you to keep an eye on everyone else. Perhaps these threats are just a hoax, a joke from a mad person, but we can't be sure.
Okay, I said. $500 a day plus expenses.
$400, Rick replied.
$450, I said.
Okay, $450,
Rick replied with a quick smile. But what will I do on the set? I asked. I don't know anything about how movies are made.
You're going to be Miss Lane's advisor on detectives and investigations, Rick said. In the movie, she plays a private detective. You can tell her about how detectives work. You can start work tomorrow, and bring your passport with you.
My passport? I asked. Why?
I said this movie is an international thriller, Rick answered. We've finished the Asian scenes already. Today is the last day of shooting here at the studios. After today, the whole crew moves on to South America. When we finish there, we'll go on to Europe.
What scenes are you shooting today, Rick? I asked.
Today's scenes will be shot with some of the stars' stunt doubles, Rick said. There's lots of fighting in today's scenes. There'll be blood everywhere. Not real blood, of course.
I ordered coffee. Rick wasn't telling me everything. I was sure of that. He was hiding something. But what? Perhaps I'd never know. But you said that Gail was working here today, too, I said. Can I watch the shooting for a while? Rick shook his head.
Sorry, Len. It's a closed set. That means no visitors. Carla Chapman, the director of the movie, insists on that. She says that visitors always upset the actors.
But I'm not a visitor, I said. I'm Miss Lane's advisor on being a detective. You said so yourself. Rick thought for a minute.
Okay, Len. There's not time to get you a security pass, but I'll get you onto the set using mine.
We finished our coffee and left the commissary. A group of cowboys was just arriving. We walked over to Studio 9. There was a big sign outside. Death behind the door. Set closed. Rick spoke to the security guards who let us both in.
Follow me, Rick whispered. Be careful. It will be very dark inside. And don't make a noise, or Carla will kill us, and there really will be blood everywhere.
We walked very quietly through the darkness of the studio. Everywhere there were boxes and ropes,
metal wires and electric cables. In the distance, we could see a bright light. When we got closer, we could see that it was a huge bright blue screen, like a movie theater screen. We could see someone hanging down on a rope in front of the screen. "This is a blue screen," Rick whispered. "Later, these shots will be combined with some shots of a rocky mountainside. When the audience sees the movie in a movie theater, they'll think that the actor was really climbing a mountain." I watched in silence. I was fascinated. The person on the rope was still quite high up in front of the screen, at least 15 meters from the floor. Suddenly, there was a loud scream, and the actor fell to the studio floor. Lights went on everywhere. We ran towards the person on the floor. It was a woman with short blonde hair. "It's Gail," I said to Rick. Chapter 6. The Bodyguards. There was a moment of silence on the set. Rick and I stared at the blonde woman on the floor. Then people came running from all directions. Rick took charge. "Stand back," Rick shouted. "Get an ambulance!" I was quickly pushed to the back of the crowd of actors and technicians who came and stood around the woman. I walked slowly away from them. There was nothing I could do. "Gail is dead," I thought. "She died in front of me, and I'm the man who was going to protect her." I felt terrible. I had wanted to protect Gail Lane. I had only met her once, but I had liked her very much, even if I didn't admire her choice of boyfriend. Sadly, I walked towards some other sets which were not in use that day. After a minute, I came to one which was like the inside of a Japanese home. It looked like a real room, but there was no ceiling, and there were only 3 walls. There were several doors which didn't open. There was nowhere to go. And I had nowhere to go now. Because of Gail's death, my job had finished before it had really started. I left the Japanese room and walked slowly on, through half-built sets and across open spaces. Studio 9 was the size of an aircraft hangar, and several Boeing 747s could have been parked inside it. 10 minutes later, I saw something that I didn't believe. I saw her, Gail, just for a moment. I saw her bright blonde hair as a door near the end of the building opened and closed. I couldn't believe it. Slowly and carefully, I walked towards the door. Soon I realized that I was looking at a row of dressing rooms, the rooms where actors changed their clothes and wait during shooting. Each dressing room had a door and a window. There was a light on inside one of the rooms, though all the others were dark and empty. I stepped quietly over to the lighted window and looked in. Gail Lane was sitting at a table with a cup in her hand. Her face was wet and her eyes were shiny. She had been crying. I didn't have time to think about what I could see. As I looked through the window, someone grabbed my right arm and twisted it behind my back. I turned round and tried to grab my attacker. That was a mistake. My feet were kicked from under me. I fell to the floor, and my attacker jumped on top of me. I struggled and I tried to get free, but my face was pressed against the floor, and the attacker was still holding my right arm. And now they had their knee on the back of my neck.